this is Mike Dilt with the Relax Back UK show on UK Health Radio, your global real feel-good radio station. On the Relax Back UK show, we explore all kinds of health topics, so keep listening and enjoy the ride. Hello and thank you for joining me, Mike Dilk, on the Relax Back UK show here on UK Health Radio. Now, are you in pain right now? Is a member of your family suffering from long-term pain? Back pain, sciatica pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, headache pain, all have one thing in common, and that is they can really wreck lives. Drugs for pain relief can be a huge problem.
I've spent a lot of my medical career in the chronic pain clinic in the NHS, really trying to help people with the medicines that are available for long-term pain. Sometimes they help, that's brilliant. Sometimes they really have tough side effects, which means they're not on balance helping very much. And for some conditions, they just don't help. And it's difficult for people to understand that.
Yes, today's topic is pain. And my guests are Dr. Anthony Ordman and specialist nurse Sophie Hayes from Integro Clinic. We discuss many aspects of pain and methods to allay it. The Integro Clinic specialises in helping with medicines derived from the cannabis plant. We explore that in some detail, and there's also news of an approaching webinar on back pain. So please do stay tuned for a fantastically interesting show about a very important topic. Thank you.
This show is cool.
My guests today are Dr. Anthony Ordman and specialist nurse Sophie Hayes, and they're both from the Integro Pain Clinic. So, pain is the topic, and we're not talking about the pain that you get when you stub your toe and then you kind of swear and it hurts like crazy, but then just goes after a few seconds. Pain is odd because it's very subjective, really. I've been lucky. I don't think during my life I've ever really been in real pain. Sure, I've hurt myself and things have been painful, but I've never really been in a situation where I just can't do anything but think about the pain that I'm suffering. So to start off with, I asked Dr. Anthony Ordman, it's kind of a difficult question, really, seeing as pain is so subjective and down to the individual. I asked him, what sort of pain are we really talking about here?
Well, we're really talking about long-term pain, or some people call it chronic pain. It's very difficult for a lot of people to understand or to believe, but there are a lot of very unfortunate people everywhere in the world who have pain that just doesn't go away. And as you say, we're all used to the pains that happen when we stub our toe or whatever, and we expect it to go away. And we also expect medicines to be able to help it. But unfortunately, and I've spent a lot of my medical career dealing with this, there are people who just have long-term pain. And that's really what we're dealing with at Integro Clinics.
Right. And the point is, it wrecks people's lives. It can just destroy your life.
Yeah, even women who are very good with pain, their lives can be really messed up by long-term pain, because they not only have the pain, but they have all the miserable consequences that go with it. They can't be active anymore. They lose their role in society or in their family or at work, and they understandably get very low in mood as a result, and they can't sleep. And we all know what happens when you can't sleep properly. Yeah. The next day is worse. So pain is a very big subject. It's not just the physical sensation of the pain that is so difficult to deal with, but it's everything else that comes with it.
Sure. So there are many different methods that people have tried to, get rid of pain. I gave this the small topic of when I stub my toe. Actually, I'll probably swear or shout, and actually, in the short term, that seems to help. So I can see you're both nodding your heads there. So, everyone has stubbed their toe and probably sworn. We're all familiar with that. But you guys specialize in a different sort of medication. That's medication that's derived from the cannabis plant. Is that right?
Well, that's right. Sophie is the real expert on these medicines. I just do what she tells me. But I've spent, I'm joking a bit, but I've spent a lot of my medical career in the chronic pain clinic in the NHS, really trying to help people with the medicines that are available for long-term pain. Sometimes they help, that's brilliant. Sometimes they really have tough side effects, which means they're not on balance helping very much. And for some conditions, they just don't help. And it's difficult for people to understand that. But the few months I've spent now prescribing cannabis medicines for long-term pain have been amazing. And Sophie will back me up on that. We've got people who are very much happier now than they have been for the last many, many years, not because cannabis is making them high. We never want to do that, but because cannabis medicines are really reducing the impact of pain on them and reducing their pain.
Okay, right. I want to explore this quite a bit further, but let me just ask kind of a fairly basic question first about sort of namings of things. So you mentioned that your medicines are derived from the cannabis plant, but in sort of general language, people talk about the hemp plant and the marijuana plant. So let's start at basics. Are those different, or is it just names for the same thing?
So, I mean, yeah, the cannabis and marijuana are the same thing. They're just different words for the same thing. Marijuana has more historical negative sort of racial undertones, and sort of the history of where that word has come from is sort of a word that was almost created by the National Federation of the Bureau of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. The head of this organization was called Anslinger, and he was actually he was a key leader in the prohibition of alcohol movement in the States. And then
when a bit of a killjoy to me.
I think that's the thing as well, and he made a real career out of exactly that. He was the head of the prohibition of alcohol movement, and then when that prohibition was ended, he was then out of a career. So he then started to look for avenues or other drugs that could be placed in the same category of this very dangerous, harmful category. And marijuana was the word created to refer to cannabis, to make it sound more Mexican, because cannabis had actually been prescribed for many, many years, right up until sort of 50s, like early 70s. It was actually still prescribed as a medication. And doctors were actually upset at the time about the idea of it being gotten rid of and removed from their toolbox. And I think it was interesting what you were saying earlier about cannabis medicines and where they fit now, that we want to sort of emphasize that for doctors, it's another tool in your toolbox in order to help any number of your patients for different conditions. So that's sort of the difference there is no difference between marijuana and cannabis. It's the same thing. It's just marijuana has these underlying connotations and contexts. Hemp is a different thing. So hemp is classified as is the cannabis plant that is cultivated particularly for fiber production, not for human consumption. However, it recently has changed that because the THC content has to be below 2 or 3% in order to be classified as hemp, and that those flowers are now also being used to produce a lot of the over-the-counter CBD oils that you can find in shops and Boots and all these other places. Right. So that's the key difference.
Okay, so what you just said there kind of leads me on to another question, because you said CBDs and THC. So the question really is, what are the active ingredients in the cannabis that kind of you can use to help to make useful medication? And if you're courageous enough, you can actually say the names rather than just CBD or THC. And I'm not sure I'm going to be brave enough to do that. So go ahead, tell us what the active ingredients are.
Okay, so there are about 144 different cannabinoids in cannabis plant. There's also other chemicals that are referred to as terpenes or flavonoids, and these are sort of additional underlying chemicals that can have therapeutic effects, but there's not been a huge amount of research into them, but it's just interesting and something to be aware of. The two main cannabinoids that you've mentioned are THC, so delta-9 tetrahydrocannabidiol, and cannabinol, and CBD, which is cannabidiol.
Right.
And these are the two that are the most researched and therefore have been approved to be prescribed as medications because they have the most research behind them.
Okay, well done. Thank you. For the rest of this chat, we will refer to them as CBDs and THCs. So they are the active ingredients that have been found in cannabis. Is that's it? That's correct. So are there lots of different sorts of CBDs and lots of different sorts of THCs?
No, there's just different strengths. They are they're chemical compounds that they are found within the cannabis plant, but there are not different types. There's just different qualities and strengths.
Okay. Now, at the moment, there's a lot of stuff available. You can go and buy them in the pharmacy, lozenges and sweets and even teas and probably creams that contain CBDs. And the manufacturer of those will say they're good for anxiety and all sorts of stuff like that. Is that what you're dealing with, or you're dealing with the THCs? Tell me.
And we deal with both. I mean, both
Okay.
CBD and THC have medical applications. I think the difference to emphasize is exactly as you said before, and I hate to use the word proper, but it's interesting that you used that word earlier when you were talking about there's pain and then there's pain that requires medical intervention, and it's the same, and I would use the same terminology for anxiety or inflammation, that those are the things that CBD can be helpful for. And the difference is that, yes, if you have a mild anxiety, that you might be able to find some benefit. Some people do from over-the-counter products, but there's no standardization for those products for what percentage of CBD is required of them, what the carrier oils are, what the standards for production are, and the difference between those and the CBD products that we work with are that they've gone through the process of EU GMP approval to be medicinal products.
Right. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk recently, hasn't there, about the sort of products that may or may not contain CBD oils that you buy. They're not really very well regulated. So, yeah. All right. So the medicines that you prescribe and use contain both CBDs and THCs. Is it possible? Sorry, yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
and they contain other substances as well, as Sophie had mentioned. Some of them are pure CBD, usually with THC as well, and we vary the mix according to each patient. But very importantly, the terpenes and the flavonoids also present in the plant. If we allow some of those to come through in the medicine, then we can be even more subtle in the effects that we get from the medicine. If a person's not sleeping well, then the terpenes can be very helpful, and that makes the plant or the mixture an indica mixture, which is more helpful for sleep and sedation. If somebody needs to be wide awake for the next day to look after their kids or whatever, then we'll go much more for a sativa blend with different or no terpenes. So there's CBD and there's THC, but there's also the other substances as well.
Okay. Right. The next question that I'm dying to ask is a really difficult one, and I just know that will not be a simple answer. But is it possible to describe in the terms of the layman, I'm very much a layman, how these things work? What does it do to our system such that it prevents us feeling pain?
Well, what's happening is that the molecules, the CBDs and the THC, are landing on receptor molecules within our own bodies. Now, all animals, even sort of small multicellular animals for millions of years, have had receptors in the body that respond to these chemicals, and it's called the endocannabinoid system. And the reason it's there is that the body uses that system to regulate itself. it can calm down excitable areas of the brain or the nervous system. So one of the features about the long-term pain that we've been talking about is that the nervous system that processes the pain gets all overexcited, and you get extra cells developing there, and they're all jangled and overactive, which is why you get this long-term pain, and it's so bad for people. There's already a mechanism built into bodies to calm that jangliness down. And sometimes it works and your stubbed toe just settles down again. But sometimes it doesn't work and you have people with lifelong pain. And so we are using this built-in endocannabinoid system, which either just by chance or by the virtue of some deity, we can manipulate by chemicals that our ancestors have found in cannabis plants. So just in the same way as morphine originally came from poppies and aspirin originally came from willow trees, we're using a medicine that comes from cannabis plants, and it's no different from a lot of other medicines, actually.
Yeah, I think, and that point about the endocannabinoid system pre-existing in your body, that obviously predates the existence of cannabis. The reason that cannabis medicine seems to work so well on that system is because that system we already produce chemicals in our body that interact with that system that have the same effects. So anandamide is one of these, is something that is produced when you exercise, for example. And people, which is great, works effectively for many people, but for people who find it difficult to produce that chemical on their own, so the inability to exercise regularly if you are in chronic pain, you need to supplement that action. And the cannabinoids like THC and CBD simply mimic the action of those pre-existing chemicals. So it's not that we have a system built for these medicines, it's that these medicines behave that way, the same way that our body already would try to regulate itself.
Okay, all right. So just for me, then there are two systems at play here. There's the nervous system in the body, and then the other system, which with the long, complicated name that you just said. What was that?
Well, the endocannabinoid system.
That's it.
Is a part of the nervous system.
Oh, okay. All right. Now,
so it's a built-in part of the nervous system, and you also find it in other parts of the body as well. For example, the immune cells.
Okay.
But today we're mainly talking about the nervous system, and within that system, there's the endocannabinoid system.
Okay. So earlier on, when you were talking about when you've been having pain for a long time, it's like the nervous system, or that part of the nervous system, gets out of kilter. And it's almost like it's expecting pain, therefore it experiences pain and you feel pain. Is that okay? You're both nodding your head. So I've got the right. So you need something to kind of interrupt that system, that feedback loop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. To turn down the feedback loop, to turn down the volume on the pain.
And that's pretty much what these drugs seem to do.
Yeah, when the body's not been able to do it itself. Normally the body can settle itself down, but for some reasons and in some conditions the body can't do enough of that, and therefore finally we're finding a way to help.
Yeah, no,
I
understand.
Yeah.
Let me ask another very basic question, which might be a bit dumb, but pain is actually a very important thing. We gave the example of stubbing your toe, right? You feel pain for a reason, like to try, don't do that again. So pain's important. So if you are treating someone who has long-term pain and you're using something that dulls their pain, can that have difficult knock-on effects? Like, for instance, could they burn themselves and not really notice, or not notice so much? Or can you direct the pain dulling to their particular thing they're suffering?
No, we're not stopping that acute pain that you're mentioning. People are not now numb,
right,
and they're going to burn themselves and not realize it. Thank goodness. What we're doing is settling down. I'm not saying we're stopping all pain, but we're settling down and making much more tolerable the long-term chronic pain feeling.
Okay,
that's what we're doing. So it's really very safe.
This show is cool. cool!
We will be returning to our discussion on pain and cannabis medication shortly. We'll cover, amongst other things, the law, what the legal situation is at the moment, how you actually take it, the dosage, and evidence, the evidence that it works, all kinds of stuff. In the meantime, please do remember that there's a webinar where much of this will be discussed and covered. It will be interactive, so you can ask questions, and also will be an emphasis on back pain. And the back pain charity will be there interacting with you as well. So it will definitely go into specifics about back pain. Now, I'm a sponsor of the back pain charity. It's a wonderful charity, so I really would urge you to attend if you are a sufferer of back pain or know someone who is. That will be on May the 27th at 7 p.m. You can sign up on the Integro website, which is integroclinics.com.
This show is cool!
I've got to ask this because it's going to be in people's minds. And from what Sophie was saying earlier, the chap who wanted to stop everyone drinking and then moved on to stopping the use of cannabis. What is the current legal situation for medicine derived from cannabis?
So currently in the UK, the law changed in November 2018. It rescheduled cannabis from Schedule 1, which indicates that it's dangerous, it has no medical therapeutic properties whatsoever, into Schedule 2. That means that you can now be prescribed it in the format of an unlicensed medicine or a controlled drug by a specialist doctor, and it can only be prescribed by a specialist doctor on the specialist register. As part of this, you need to be able to be reviewed on a monthly basis. Those prescriptions can only be given out for a month's worth of medication, and then at the end of that month you need to be re-reviewed by a clinician. This rescheduling also means that it allows for more research to be done on it. It's easier to apply for a grant or to get an application for research in cannabis.
Okay, so
yes, as Sophie says, it's the THC. Sorry. It's the THC that's the controlled substance, isn't it, Sophie?
Yes.
So the CBDs you can buy over the counter.
right.
Although, because we prescribe CBD, we know it's pure and we know the exact concentration. But
Yeah.
CBD you can get over the counter. It's the THC that's the controlled substance. But most people with long-term pain actually need a bit of THC in their medicine, otherwise it doesn't always work hugely well.
Okay, and is the reasoning behind this being so controlled still is that not so much is known about it, or research is still going on? Why are people still sort of a bit het up about it?
Because of exactly that, I think, and it's a difficult place for it to be, I think, because on the one hand, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence where people have said, I've used it for 20 years and there's no issues, I've never had any problems. And then there's the fact that the UK is renowned worldwide for the quality of the medical care that we provide and for the medications that we produce, and that in order for those to get to that standard, it has to you have to provide enough gold standard research on those medications and demonstrate their efficacy, their safety. And it's just that because of restrictions and prohibition laws that have been in place on cannabis, that we don't have that amount of research from the UK specifically. It's been researched in many other countries, like Israel, for example, has done a lot of work over the decades about cannabis medicines and its efficacy. So that's the reason why it has to remain in this controlled drug status until, as we do more research, that will improve, I imagine.
Sure. I'm going to ask you about the research momentarily, but just to what the situation where we are at the moment, I looked at the NHS website actually a little bit earlier, and it does suggest that there can be side effects from these sorts of drugs, and it suggested psychosis and dependency. So is that a concern as far as you're concerned? Do you monitor your patients very closely?
Well, most of the evidence, such as it is, about psychosis and dependency actually comes not only from people illicitly using joints and smoking cannabis, in other words, where the doses are much, much higher than the ones we're using. B, is it evidence, or is it just sort of bad PR that's been deliberately put around? The facts are a bit woolly out there. It's been given a bad name. I really do think that if people are smoking very strong joints a great deal, that they're at risk of becoming dependent and they're at risk of becoming psychotic. But I would stress that the doses we are using are much, much lower. We never want to make anybody high. We never really want to make anybody sleepy. We think that in those circumstances, the risk of dependency is very, very low, and the risk of psychosis is almost zero. But even then, we screen our patients very, very carefully. We ask their GPs for their medical history. We meet them, and the appropriate specialist interviews them. And in fact, Sophie's interviewed them first most of the time. So they're probably better screened than they would be in the NHS. And yes, we do follow them up every month, or even more frequently than that in the first few months, until they're really well settled and we're happy they're safe. And then actually Sophie continues to monitor them, and she's an experienced clinician and reports back to us if she's at all concerned. So we are monitoring more thoroughly than most of us could ever achieve in our NHS clinics.
Right.
And so far we've had no problem with psychosis or anything else. And we, I feel, and I'll put my name to this, that cannabis medicines are far less likely to cause dependency than conventional medicines such as morphine, Valium, tramadol.
Yeah.
Gabapentin, all these conventional medicines that people happily pop, they can't get off them. But if
there's a real problem at the minute, aren't there? Isn't there? It started in the States and it's now here. People are addicted to pain medication. Yeah, people
are dying from them. They say that the only way you can die from cannabis use is if a ton of it falls on your head. And that's not my joke, but it's a truism, and it's much safer. It doesn't stop you breathing like morphine does. So although it is not a licensed medicine, it hasn't been tested quite as thoroughly. I feel much happier, much safer in prescribing it for patients than long-term morphine or long-term gabapentin, for example.
Okay, very, very interesting. All right. Now, when you do prescribe it, how do people take it? Is it injected, or is it pills, or what happens?
So I have a number of options, really, sort of whether on whatever's most appropriate for that individual. But it is prescribable in flower format. So the way that people imagine cannabis to look, it looks like that, but it is produced in a pharmaceutical facility and is of medical grade. Then there are cannabis oils.
So what do you do with that? Well, you smoke that, do you?
You vaporize that. Right. That. It is worth saying that if you are prescribed cannabis medication in the flowers form, and you are found to be smoking rather than vaporizing it voids the legality of that prescription, because the action of smoking could be more harmful to you. Sure. Vaporizing is an even way, a gentler way of heating it without causing that sort of a risk of the carcinogens caused by burning at higher than 200 degrees.
Yeah. Okay.
You can have it, and I think the way I would usually frame it is that flower medications of cannabis are short acting, so they last for around 2 hours, whereas cannabis oils can last around 6 hours, and they're delivered by sort of a syringe, and you hold them under your tongue sublingually and then swallow them, and that's how you administer those. Or you can take capsules that now are available. So they look like any other medication in pill format that you've ever taken, and they also would be classed as long-acting cannabis medicines, and they can last for up to 6 hours.
Okay, so this is all dead easy. You don't have to go and see the doctor for this. You can get your prescription, take the medicine at home.
Yeah, the doctor or the nurse doesn't have to administer the medication for you. You are being assessed by the clinicians, but then you are administering yourself at home.
Okay. So and all right. Is there a chance that if you took it all in one go, would you get some results that you might not be looking for? Will that get you high?
So I think the interesting thing here is that if you're talking about getting high, that idea of that what people may class as recreational use of cannabis is that actually someone with chronic pain and someone who would be classed as healthy could use the same amount of cannabis, but because of the deficiency in the individual with chronic pain on the endocannabinoid system, they will not experience that high that people refer to if they're using recreationally.
Right.
And that is because of the deficiency that we are replacing. If you took a lot of the misunderstanding about cannabis medicines is that when patients are using them, people say exactly that, oh, are you getting high off of it? Do you worry about getting high off of it? And actually people with deficiencies would have to take a lot of it in order to feel that more what might be referred to as psychoactive effects of it. If you took all of your cannabis oil in one go, you would fall asleep and then you would wake up. That is the worst thing that would happen.
So as far as overdoses go, it's pretty good.
Yeah. And by the way, we're watching out for people being stupid with their medicines. And if there's any hint they're messing around with their medicines, then we say bye-bye.
Yep,
we're having a common sense agreement or contract with our patients that this is serious business. There's no messing around here. And we're nice to our patients, don't get me wrong, but we're businesslike as well.
Yeah. Well, if they're in pain, they will be on board with the program. I'm quite sure. Something we touched on a little bit earlier, but I want to go back to. Although cannabis has been around for thousands of years. What about the research? Because you said, well, there is research happening. There's going to be more. Where are we now with the research into the efficacy of all this?
There are quite a lot of papers out there in the medical literature which show that for various conditions, just for example, fibromyalgia, there's the best evidence. One of the conditions that you can't treat properly with conventional medicines is so much better with cannabis. So there are a lot of what are called grade B medical scientific papers out there to support the usefulness and safety of cannabis medicines. But what we don't have yet is the grade A research. And these are the large controlled randomized studies, which are usually financed by the pharmaceutical companies that want to sell the drug. We don't have those yet, partly, as Sophie was saying earlier, because there isn't the legal framework, or there hasn't been until very recently, but partly because actually there isn't the big pharma finance to pay for these studies. That's why NICE find it very difficult to support cannabinoids for most NHS patients. It'll come, but we haven't got there yet. But the easing of the regulations will gradually make that more possible. But one of the benefits of our being able to practice cannabis medicine in this way is that we can start now to build up the body of evidence and knowledge, and then make other people see it's worthwhile looking into this. Then the grade A studies will come along. Sophie, you were going to say something else.
No, it's exactly what you said. It's sort of getting people to understand the trajectory that cannabis medicines are going to have to go through in order to get to what might be more widely accessible via NHS, for example. So like you say, you've got places where, like Integro, where we've got private clinics able to prescribe cannabis medicines in this controlled format. And from that, the more prescriptions that are written, the more data is collected on which ones are appropriate for which symptom management. And then from that informs research. The research informs clinical trials, and then the clinical trials are, if enough of them are done at a gold standard, that is the evidence base that will be created, that NICE will then be able to confidently back as being able to be distributed to thousands of people that the NHS treat.
It sounds like you're confident that these sort of drugs will be able to be used in the future and will help a lot of people. You know, that's
Yeah, I mean,
that's how you see
I
it,
think
isn't it?
the fascinating thing about cannabis from a clinical perspective, or cannabis medicines, is that it's a format in which you are basically prescribing what we might term as polypharmacy. You're actually able to target multiple different symptoms with just one medication. And I know doctors are not fans of having to prescribe multiple pills and multiple tablets, and patients aren't fans of taking them. So there's that aspect of it, but there's also the fact that it has so many individual chemicals within it that have so much potential. There's research that demonstrates that THC has neuroprotective properties. There's evidence that there is certain cannabinoids like CBG that have antibiotic properties.
There's a wonderful overview that you guys have given about the work you're doing and the sort of things that medication derived from the cannabis plant can help with. But if people are listening to this and want to find out a bit more, there's actually an approaching webinar, and that's been arranged with you guys, Integrate Clinics, as well as the Back Care charity. Now, I know the Back Care charity because I'm a sponsor, corporate sponsor of the Back Care charity, and I think you guys are as well. So they're a fabulous charity, and you're doing a webinar with them. And it's very appropriate because they help people that are in pain in the back with their back, and I'm sure you help a lot of people with that as well. So can you just tell us a little bit about the webinar and how people can get involved if they want to, either of you?
Yeah, of course. So the webinar is coming up on the 25th of May. It will be at 7:00 in the evening. It's free to register. You go to the Integrate Clinics website or the Back Care website, and any of the socials, so Facebook, Twitter, and so on. So you can find the link there to register. The webinar is going to be focusing on discussing cannabis-based medicines for back pain, so the application of these medications in back pain, and we'll be going through. I know Dr. Ordman's very kindly agreed to be part of it, and Dr. Amaldi from Integro Clinics, and also Dr. Hammond from Back Care Charity are going to do presentations on the different strategies for management of back pain, ranging from anything that's available to you in terms of treatment from your hospital to non-pharmacological methods that you can use at home to manage your back pain, all the way through to cannabis medicines and how they can apply in the management of back pain.
Okay, so if you are suffering, or a loved one or someone you know is suffering from back pain, it sounds like a very useful resource. So that's May the 25th. Details on your website. Sophie, can you just give your website, please?
Yes, so it's Integro Clinics, Integro spelled INTEGRO. So integroclinics.com is the website.
Excellent. Right. Look, guys, both of you, thank you very much indeed for talking to me today. I think people are going to find that not only very interesting, but actually very useful as well. So many thanks.
Thanks for having us so long. Nice to meet you.
Very well.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much to my guests on this week's show, and they were Dr. Anthony Ordman and Sophie Hayes of the Integrate Medical Clinics. And of course, thank you to you for listening. That was the Relax Back UK show with me, Mike Dill. Thank you for listening, and please do join us again next time.